All right, everybody, welcome to the Lead Live's first ever AI Town Hall. Hopefully all of you can hear me. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, well, welcome to a very crowded Pint and Plow. I'm sorry there's no food, but that's okay. It's a Tuesday. Thanks to the Walters for being open today for us. Thank you very much. Terrific job on their part. I'm Louis Amistoy. I'm the editor and publisher of the Kerr County Lead. When we came up with this idea, I've been thinking about doing this for a long time. Like, what would be a town hall that I could do? And the more that I thought about it, the more AI came to my thinking. And I want to start this off with a story about technology. In journalism, journalism was revolutionized by technology through the years. And one of the first big ones was the telegraph. And that taught us how to write in a formula. Because when you were in the battlefields of the Civil War, you had to write quickly to get on the telegraph to get your report back to wherever it was going to be, New York or Washington, D.C., or Philadelphia or Boston. And you had to write in a short formula that's called the inverted pyramid. And a lot of people in journalism are like, well, that's dead. We don't like that anymore. It's really simple. But as I'm going to show you, AI understands it perfectly. When I tell it to write AP style, boom, it's ready to go. And I resisted this for the longest time. Bobby Templeton at Ingram ISD one time asked me, he goes, how do you do all this work, Louis? Is it AI? And I'm like, AI, get out of here. I write that with pride. But I like to think of myself as a sports writer first and foremost. And when I see a box score in a game, I know definitively how that's going to write. But it's going to take me 15 to 20 seconds to write that. And the more I thought about that, the more game-changing it was for me. And I couldn't get my head around it. I couldn't get my head around where we were going with live video. I got my head around that 10 years ago, 20 years ago now almost. I couldn't get my head around where we were going with AI. And I knew that Charby Torque at the city of Kerrville is really smart. I knew she was thinking about it. And then I know George Phillips, and he's thinking about it all the time, actually. Tim Rye at Peterson's not thinking about it. But now he is, right? And Clint Hall, he's replacing Brian Robichaux today, who his daughter's having a baby. Is that right? Is that the story?
Had a grandson this morning.
Oh, he had a grandson this morning. Congratulations to Brian, who could not be here today. And then I heard from Dr. McCormick at Schreiner University that these two guys from Schreiner, who will introduce themselves in a minute, were working on some projects together, both in the IT perspective and in the psychology perspective of this. One of the things that we're seeing is that, and I write about this all the time, is that a lot of you don't know that you're being engaged with an AI literally every day. And the Pew Research Center just had a study that said only 29% of Americans think that they're interacting with AI on a daily basis. And I think my panel would probably say, that's not the case, right? It's not the case. Every day you're interacting with AI. And so what I wanted to do was share with you this group and what they're learning and because every day is new. Literally every day is new in this field. It's fundamentally reshaped how I work. It's fundamentally going to reshape our lives, and it's coming very, very quickly. And you probably got, how many of you got my emails about this event saying, hey, come, here are the terms you're going to learn. Here are all the companies you're going to learn. Well, before we jump into this, I'm going to show you one quick exercise on AI. This is Claude, and it is telling me that Claude and I have a very nice relationship. I talk to it all the time. Whoop, let me get it to you guys. Help to have it to you first.
Anthropic's pretty good.
And here it is. Here is Claude. Let me take off the logos. I'm trying to do many things at once. Claude is my new best friend. And also, I have a new best friend called Notebook LM, which is from Google, and Google Gemini, which is another good friend, and the products keep coming. What you're seeing here is a tool that I use every day, and I'm just going to show you one quick thing. So bear with me for a second. This won't take very long at all. Stand by, Leslie. Oh, it's just old. It's there. It's there, Leslie. It's there, Leslie. Okay. So the other day I had a box score from, let's say, Schreiner University. And in this file here, I've got it somewhere, of my stuff. All my stuff that I have. Let me just search for it real quick. You guys are seeing the sausage being made. Let's see here. It's in here somewhere. I know it. I'm going to find it. Well, you know what? Here's the thing, though. I can just go back to their website, and I can find it there. Give me 1 minute. It's going to work. Trust me.
This AI stuff is great, isn't it?
Feel this is like wizard.
Okay, what's going to happen here? I'm going to download this baseball score.
Yes.
Trust me, it's going to work.
Yeah.
What's that?
There it is. There's our baseball score. And you can see it processing. I've just uploaded a PDF to it. Okay? And in the PDF, it has all the box score information. This is the stats. So I'm going to give it some instructions now. Okay, you may not be able to see what I'm writing. I'm telling it to write me a box of game story. So what this has done now is, this was not a good day for our Shriner Mountaineers. They lost 14-0. Pretty easy game story to write. I can see it, 14-0, not a good day for Shriner. But what it's done for me is it's given me all the basics, right? And that's how fast it is. In my head, I know that I can do this in about 15 minutes. And you just saw how fast that is. Now, the beauty of this is I don't see this as generative AI, what you guys are looking at. I see this as assistive AI. So it's assisting me in my work. Now, maybe I have interviewed the coach afterwards. I've been to the game, I've taken photos, or I've taken video of the game, and I might have some audio from that interview. I plug it into AI, it gives me a transcript, I pull those quotes out, I add it to the story, we have a new piece, we have a deeper piece of this as well. That is where we're headed, and this is just one little piece of this. This is just one simple exercise that took me, well, other than I didn't have it ready to go, but it's really quick. And at the very bottom of this, in that same amount of time, it's giving me also all of the game stats. So for me, it's a publishable piece right off the bat. It's giving me the stats, it's giving me the line score. This alone, doing that takes, we used to have newspapers, an entire department of what we called agate clerks, who just entered this stuff manually. And that's gone because of this kind of technology. So that's why I wanted you to come today. I wanted you to see how this was changing my life. I wanted you to understand how it's going to change your life. And with that, I want to introduce you to my panel. And I want them to go ahead and introduce themselves and tell us just 2 minutes of what you've done. We're going to start with George Phillips, who's a rock star, by the way.
George Phillips. I'm the Director of Technology and Software Development for a 150-year-old law firm called Morgan, Lewis & Bockius. They're a global law firm, probably about top 10 in the world as far as size and revenue. I manage all the technology stacks for the teams that do data analysis. And we are running our own models internally, and we're using it for the very thing that Lewis showed you, which is we're taking case information, we're taking tons of information, communications, text messages, email threads, and we're quickly solidifying it down into case information that makes sense. We're taking lots of notes and turning them into defensive case strategies. We're doing all kinds of analysis, essentially. And I've been doing analysis for Morgan Lewis for 16 years, managing their operations and building tools. And you'll see we have multiple types of AI, multiple types of machine learning that has been prevalent in technology for the last 25 years. But we're now just really hitting the exponential mark where it's taking off and adoption is there. And it's an exciting time, but essentially that's what I do. I manage all those groups that do that stuff and present stuff for cases, for litigation and for defense.
Hi, my name is Charby Tork. I am the Director of Innovation and Technology for the City of Kerrville. I would say our journey in AI for the city is we're very much in an infancy stage because my approach is, I think we need to crawl before we can walk. In terms of AI, we just got to understand it better, but it's here, right? So from a city standpoint, we want to make sure we understand it, and priority first is going to be transparency and oversight. So we're using kind of more of the LLM, like the large language model, like ChatGPT or Copilot. And like I said, very early in the infancy of our journey in AI, but I do foresee it becoming something that we can integrate seamlessly into our citizen services. But right now it's more behind the scenes, like efficiency, like repetitive tasks, replacing some of the repetitive tasks we have, summarizing some of these large legislation that we have. So that's really where we're at from a city standpoint with AI.
My name is Clint Hall. I'm a server and cloud integration engineer with Peterson. I've been with them for about 6 years now. Oh, yeah, sorry about that. I can speak louder. I've been with Peterson for about 6 years now. 20 of it has been in IT total. We have been looking at IT or at AI for a lot of the consolidation of our day-to-day work. There's a lot of administrative overhead that you find yourselves doing repetitively, much to the point of what many people have already said here. A doctor, for example, will spend 50% of his time simply putting data in of a patient in their EHR versus actually having one-to-one time with the patient themselves and building up that bond and trust. So we're looking at ways to streamline and make that more efficient for our doctors and clinicians as well as our administrative staff so that they can make that repetitive work you do every day when you get the same questions over and over again. Instead of having to, let me write that out again, you can just simply put it in there and get it right back out real quickly.
Hey, good evening, everyone. My name's too loud. I'm going to switch microphones. Tim Rye. I'm with Peterson Health. I've worked with them about 13 years. I'm our Chief Strategy Officer. I have an operations background in physician practices for most of my career. And I come from this from a different angle. When I think about AI and how it can help our docs, it's efficiency of time and quality of care and outcomes. So what are the components of AI that are able to assist in those two things? The challenge in healthcare right now is there's countless companies pitching the things they can do in those areas and vetting through making the right decisions when you're talking about the expense involved in setting these types of things up. You don't want to get that wrong. I've seen this with other technologies in healthcare. Somewhere 3 to 5 years in, that 100 companies becomes about 5, and it totally changes the game. And so you kind of wish you picked one of those 5 out of the gate. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have right now. And I can get into it now or later, but we're using AI anywhere from in a We're piloting in a physician exam room where it can dictate while a doctor and patient are just interacting to a technology now that helps our gastroenterologists detect polyps that are almost undetectable with the naked eye. And so it's all over the place, but I'm seeing a lot of really neat things happening on the healthcare side. But I promise you one thing, I'm the least qualified person up here to talk about the technology of AI.
Hello. Is this working?
Yeah, you're good.
So my name is Sahai Tang. I'm an assistant professor at Schreiner University, and I am in the computer science department. Some of my background is in self-driving and AI development in like cybersecurity, and I'm more on the research or the academia side, where we're trying to innovate, we're trying to push a path forward with the usage of it, and like Tim was just mentioning, right? Biomedical is also a very hot field with using AI. And just a quick little snippet. You guys know donuts, right? Everybody in here knows donuts, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so in Japan, this is a true story, you can look it up. There was a chain donut store, and because they didn't have price tags on the donuts and they sold a huge variety, guess what? They're like, okay, it takes our clerks so much time just to memorize which donuts has which price tag, and each time you adjust a price tag, you got to relearn the whole catalog, right? It's not very efficient, especially for expansion and getting new employees. So they asked a company to develop a object recognition AI or classification to tell them, hey, just look at the donut and put the price tag in the cash register, right? Very simple use case. Well, somebody from the Western world took a look at that and it's like, hey, those donuts look like blood cells. So they took that and patented it, and then they put it into the medical field, and they're making billions. So yeah, AI can be used for all sorts of purposes, but there are very hampering aspects to it. For good AI, you need a lot of data. And as we all know, data is very sensitive. It is the gold of the digital era. Everybody wants that data, right? It's like valuables to them. But you have your ethical data gathering, right? You want to keep your data private. But these AI companies are going to come after your data. They're going to pay top dollar for it. So, and we'll talk about that later if you're interested. But yeah.
I'm Dr. Jordan Richard Schoner, also from Schreiner University. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology. My background, actually I'll contest Tim's point here. I'm probably the least qualified to talk about technology, at least the mechanics of how it works. I'm an experimental psychologist that focuses on judgment and decision making. So I'm more concerned about how you're impacted about technology. I study something called distributed cognition. So in other words, instead of us doing the mental footwork ourselves, we delegate that to technology. And I want to look to see how people trust it, how confident they are in those underlying responses. I've also worked a little bit in the healthcare field. So again, same principles apply here. I work with clinicians. I looked at for what we call their overconfidence bias, the extent to which they're aware of what they do and do not know. And when you bring technology to the mix, you're adding just another layer here. One of the things I'm assuming we're going to cover today is, and it's a very old principle here, technology comes before the science. And I know that sounds very peculiar, but people often understand these technical principles before they understand the abstract principles that guide them. You may not know this. As an example, it's the most concrete one I can think of. Thermodynamic theory basically begins with people studying the dynamics of steam engines and how they work. And you're seeing the same basic thing today. Right? We're unleashing these technologies, and what we find is these technologies start impacting humans before we understand the long-term impacts. And we see this with social media. When young people are using it, we see a direct proportional increase of depression, of anxiety, and even of narcissism, right? Based on taking those selfies and posting those selfies, because people think more about how they're portraying themselves to others around them. So that's a bit about me.
Real quick before we get into this, I forgot to mention that we've got Judge Rob Kelly here, Raise your hand. There you go. Councilman Kent McKinney is here. Mayor Joe Herring is here. Former Mayor Judy Eichner is, oh, there she is, right there. George couldn't come, though. I'm sorry about that. I forgot to mention that. Delane Siegerman couldn't come, but she's going to take notes, I guess. So what I want to do, though, is Jennifer Dean here is going to kind of have the microphone. I'm going to hand the microphone off to her. I want you guys to go ahead and ask this panel some questions. Yeah, does anybody have any questions? They want, oh, Joe Martin, right off the bat. Here he is.
I think George will probably recognize this question. There was a legal case out of the Southern District of New York where the plaintiff's attorneys, with a case against, I think, a Brazilian airline.
Avianca.
Yeah, they were writing a brief, and they said, I think they were using ChatGPT. They said, give me a couple of cases, say this, 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 and this. And it spit out a couple of cases that gave them this, this, and this. And they said, well, that's too good to be true. And ChatGPT lied to them. Said, yeah, it's true, these cases are real, until they got to the judge's law clerk, and the law clerk goes, judge, can't find them. So how do you stop AI from lying, from being a little too human, and lying to people about whatever it decides it wants to lie about?
Great question. So we are building our own models internally. So we're basically building ChatGPT. We're building ChatGPT internally to our law firm. So we have the equipment, the hardware, the servers. We purchase the graphic processors to run these models, and then we manage the models internally. So we can create frameworks and guidelines and force what you're describing as something called model hallucination. And if it doesn't have the facts in its corpus of data, it will create facts. And part of what we are creating is, yeah, but by design, that's what it's programmed to do, because originally it was to create narration linguistically and write things, creatively. When you manage your own models internally, you can create frameworks and guardrails, which can force it to not create new information that doesn't exist in the information that we've already put into those databases. So for the models that we're running internally, even though we control all of the facts that go into that model, we still ask our attorneys, check your citations, double check, make sure this exists. Yeah. Go to Westlaw, make sure that everything matches up and makes sense. And if you don't have your due diligence,
How does the doctor that's finding a polyp that you can't see, how do they know that polyp?
That's a fascinating technology, and that's image recognition, where it's using an image, kind of like OCR, except for images, and it's identifying, variations in coloring, or that maybe aren't discernible to the human eye, slight tints or something that's off that just they're not seeing, and it's recognizing that it's an anomaly and potentially flagging it for, and it's the same thing that we do with text. We're looking for anomalies, we're looking for inverse, we're looking for outliers. And most of this technology is just pattern recognition, not to jump on the technology piece of that, but the merging of image and AI and text and AI and language, sentiment analysis, heat in a conversation is helping us uncover a lot of malfeasance, a lot of obfuscation of data. It's a super exciting time right now for all that technology, but frameworks and guidelines are needed.
I can add on to that a little bit more if you're interested. I'll make it short. So model hallucination is a very rampant problem. Typically, right now, the way to address it is through chain of thought, where it will generate prompts itself to try to guide itself back on the correct track. So if you partner that with web crawling, where it can actually find the sources, it will be able to correct itself and not tell you the lies. And that itself has very heavily to do with how the prompts are structured. We have what's called negative words and things that you tell the AI to not do. If you don't specifically say that to the AI, it will actually just not even think about like lying and all that, that direction of thought, and it'll give you whatever it thinks. But if you tell it specifically to not do that, then it won't do that. But even then, sometimes the keywords are not correct, and the tokenizer doesn't pick it on it specifically. So that's one way of doing it. Like I said, frameworks and guidelines to help tune it. That's why when you ask ChatGPT, tell you something that's illegal, it's going to say, I can't help you with that, right? So that's how it catches itself. Now, on a more technical side, more like on the polyps, on how this stuff works. So chatbots, they're essentially a mix of natural language processing and large language models. These are working as a probability, on a probability model. So it actually predicts the token to parse and give to you. And we have the encoders and decoders to handle that part, but it's different based on the company.
You might want to break down some of these terms, by the way.
Oh.
OCR, web crawler. So again, we're trying to communicate to the public here.
Okay, let me bring it down one more layer. So
He's
essentially,
a good teacher, by the way. I can vouch for that. He's just getting ahead of himself here.
sorry, I get excited when I talk about this stuff. Natural language processing is kind of like when you and I are talking, right? We're using the English language. To the chatbots, they don't see that, right? You give it a word, for example, strawberries. You ask how many R's in a strawberry. Well, this used to be a very difficult problem. It'll tell you there's 2 R's instead of 3 R's. Why does it do that, right? It's a very simple question. You would think it counts the number of R's, but it doesn't. So it actually parses the word into what we call tokens. And then it'll match those tokens to a set of database, or what we call the model weights, and it's going to predict the answer letter by letter to print out to you.
Yeah, token is just a chunk.
Yeah.
So you're taking a whole and you're chunking it into parts. This goes with the basic theme here, right? It's all about pattern recognition. So just like you, when you're looking at someone and you don't realize this, you're breaking that person down into eyes, nose, ears, and mouth. That's what a child is doing, right? If you look at eye tracking with that, at that early developmental stage, it's trying to figure out what's going on here. First it looks at, sorry, Sasai, I'm gonna use you. First it looks at the overall shape of the face, and then it starts focusing on individual features, and many AIs kind of work in similar terms here. So it's the highest thing in terms of tokens. You can expand that. It's not just about faces, it's about words. It can be about sounds as well, right? Same thing when you're trying to learn a foreign language. Why it's hard, yeah, exactly. Why it's hard as an adult is you already have your own native language and you don't know what chunks are important here. So it sounds like noise to you. It's the same basic principle.
Yeah. As far as the polyp recognition, that's a whole separate ballgame for AI. So that's what we base off of called computer vision. So that's where it came from. And a lot of techniques that's used in computer vision is passed on to AI. So for example, when you look at an image, right, you have different filters. We have Gaussian filters, we have Kalman filters, right? You have all of these different things, and we call them kernels in the AI. So you parse each pixel by pixel, or whatever format you give it to recognize, right? And it's going to put a layer. For example, if you do a contrast layer on this, it's going to be in black and white, right? You're reducing the level of information, so it's much easier to pick out the differences. For example, if you look at the wall right there, right? That image is black and white, correct? It's very simple for your eye to pick out the outline of those, right? If it's black, there's something there. If there's white, we ignore that. So it's very simple for you to pick it out. Think of it in the same way that AI does it, right? Except instead of just one, where this is black and white, you have hundreds of filters, and we call those kernels. Each one will pick out a specific feature, right? For example, what Jordan just said earlier, my face is constructed by my eyes, my nose, my mouth, my ears, right? But whenever we're working with AI, you gotta go down even deeper. So instead of looking at my face, you start with a dot, okay? And then when you have 2 dots, you have a line. When you have a multitude of lines, you can see there's a curve to my face. I'll admit, I don't like the fact that I'm fat, but it's a rounded curve, right? So you can say, okay, this person has a rounded face, right? And then you add more and more onto that, and you finish the curve or the outline in my head, and you can say, okay, this might be a head. And then that's just the edge, right? That's just the edge recognition part. Then you look at the details on my face and say, okay, instead of maybe, I don't know, this is a drawing, then you look at the contrast, my skin pores, right? All these different features, you'll say, hey, this might be a human. And then you look at the presence of glasses, this person might wear glasses, right? You add more and more on there. Now, in terms of like anemic cells or polyps in the intestines or any of the other anomalies that we do, right? This is something that you can teach it to recognize. And once it has been trained to do that, it will do that much, much faster and much more accurate than a human, because we humans, we get tired, right? You ask me to look at 100 images and very detailed pick out every single one with a high level of accuracy, I'll get very fatigued. AI doesn't care. As long as you give it enough electricity, you have enough cooling power, it's going to keep churning, right? So that's one advantage there.
I got to contest this, okay?
Okay.
Again, I'm a psychologist, so I have to speak up for people. Some of the best evidence we have in terms of this is the best situation is AI-human teaming, right? In other words, just like any human team, and this anyone that's worked with healthcare professionals knows this, the teams are composed of various individuals. Each one of them looks at the problem in a slightly different way, but their skill sets overlap. It's the same thing with AI, right? Clinicians, in order to be able to look at the information that AI is generating, they need to have some capacity to understand it. And that's where we're getting a bit of a gap, right? But concurrently, AI is just a tool. So I really don't like to anthropomorphize. When people say it's lying, it's not lying, it doesn't know what it's doing. Right? It's just generating stuff.
Did you feel inclined to want to say please and thank you? It is very cute.
My name is Tom Fox, and I want to pick up on that point.
I don't think we can hear you, Tom, if you just want to talk into that. I think it should work.
All right, my name is Tom Fox, and I want to use that last comment to introduce the concept of the human in the loop. And I'm going to start with you Peterson guys with the following. A couple of weeks ago, Lewis wrote in the lead how he was using AI, and he said, I use it as a research assistant, and I use it as an editorial assistant. He's called it assisted AI. In the example he gave us, he showed us how he uses it as an editorial assistant. I'm also a creative, and so I use it as a research assistant as well. And I'm a ChatGPT guy, and they have deep research, so I do a lot of research in business issues. And I'll say, give me every Harvard Business Review case study on the use of AI in XYZ. That's the research. Then I get the article, and I say, now write me a 1,000-word blog post for a corporate audience using writing in the style of Tom Fox. That's the editorial assistant. But the point from the story of the lawyers is you have to double check. And I've had AI hallucinate HBR articles where I've gone back and read, tried to find the article and read it. And it's not there. And it's just a hallucination. And you have to, discard that completely. But I love the point about the team approach and how does Peterson use that human team to either assist the AI or have the AI assist the human team going forward?
I think the best example I can think of on that are orthopedic surgeons started using something called OrthoGrid for hip replacements. And I didn't know this until they started using it, but when they do measurements to replace a hip, it's all manual. And they even have these pieces of graph paper, and they're doing all this. And they're trying to get your legs equal again, is the goal when they're putting a new joint in there. Well, there is an acceptable degree of variance that's, I can't remember, a couple millimeters or something. So technically, you could have one leg slightly longer than the other, and that is a first-rate successful hip replacement. OrthoGrid removes that and helps them get equal leg length. And so I was watching a video of Dr. Verink using this tool, talking to the techs who are reading on the screen, telling them all the numbers that the OrthoGrid, that is kind of an x-ray technology, looking at the hip, saying, okay, 2 degrees this way, 1 that way, and then boom, you're on. And so it's precise. And so when you talk about a team approach where you've got scrub techs working with an orthopedist using an AI technology to ensure that going forward, every hip they do results in exact equal leg length. I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Yeah, and I just think adding to what you said is the trust but verify piece, right? I think AI is really good for that very first draft when you're using it to create an email or something. Like if you're gonna just ask ChatGPT or Copilot to generate an email and that's your final product, then you're not using it correctly. You know, it's a very good first draft, you review it, and speaking on the city's part, is we always have human oversight. You know, AI is not going to be the decision maker. There's going to be a human making the decision. Now, AI like Copilot or ChatGPT or any of these other AI tools will help get to that value add a lot quicker. Like if you're summarizing a 200-page document, I mean, that's a task that AI can do very easily, and for the most part, correct. So you need to keep the key points, and then you're going to have the human element that comes in with the oversight and analyze of, hey, I'm the final decision maker on this. So I always tell people with the city, that staff, because it's here, people are going to use it. You can't block it, but I think it's a tool, such a good tool for us to use, because for these repetitive tasks that takes up a lot of our staff time, where we could spend that time helping our citizens or getting to the root cause of whatever it is that we're working on. But I always reiterate, trust but verify. Like, use it as a first. I mean, like, I've had instances where I've used ChatGPT and I'm entering the wrong parameters. Like, no, you're not right. You know, I'm having an argument with ChatGPT, and it happens, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just forget about it. I'm going to do it myself. I mean, there are times when you're like, all right, let me take a step away from AI. You're just not. We're not on the right page here. So, I mean, that's kind of my stance on that. Is the whole trust but verify.
It's important to remember that AI is an assistant. And I know one of the finest times that I found it to be super beneficial is when you're in a 30-minute project meeting. At the end of the meeting, somebody says, who was taking notes? AI is great for that. It had summarized and remembered questions that I had forgot were asked at the very beginning. So there are times and places that it becomes a shining example, and it can just as well be a shining example of idiocy when you get these hallucinations and you're just wondering, where did you get that? Or circular logic sometimes. So there are times and places, but in the end, it's always a human, and the human interaction and the observance of what's going on is going to be most important, and take the responsibility of the action.
My name is Debbie Berry, and I'm a former educator. I'm probably loud enough. I'll try this. My question is, as educators, I can see kids using this, and what will that impact? I mean, I think about when I wrote my dissertation and how this would have helped me a whole bunch. What are you seeing?
Oh boy, you asked the right person for that one. So this has been an ongoing situation here. I was kind of known, so I've taught at many universities over the years, and I was kind of known as like the hard prof. My background in judgment decision making, I know how tricks people use to memorize things, guess things, etc. And so I was pretty good at keeping those grades in a certain place. Then all of a sudden, it's not that ChatGPT wasn't there, just people became aware of it. It became something that was widely adopted. And all of a sudden, my marks started going really high. I looked at the time for completion of these online quizzes I was giving, and it was a couple minutes, and people would be getting 7 or 8 out of 10. I was like, okay, well, obviously, correlation doesn't equal causation, but I have a pretty good idea of what's going on here. And so then what I did for my final exam is I took my questions, I ran them through ChatGPT, made sure it gave me a wrong answer if you did that. And I warned the students, do not use ChatGPT on the final. They did, and guess what happened? Those people that were performing that way, they now got 10% on the final exam. Right? So this is the problem. It goes back to what I said. People become dependent on technology. Who, maybe amongst the younger people in the room, remembers phone numbers anymore? Right? You just don't do it. That's cognitive offloading. You're assuming something else has this. A number of years ago, I think it's around 10, 15, they had something they called the Google effect. So if you give students, or anyone really, the ability to Google an answer, they think they know it now because they were able to retrieve it. It's not their memory, it's another kind of memory. And so what happens is they start overestimating their performance, and their ability to actually perform the task decreases. So that's the problem. If we're actually in a distributed cognitive system, it works quite well if you've got that technology available to you. But the other problem is this, and I've done experiments that look at this, and I call this a domesticated technology. Your mobile phone. You trust it implicitly. You trust it as much as you do a domesticated dog, and less than most people. But what's the problem here? Everyone on this panel knows this. It's hiding AI. That information you're giving is being sent off to a cloud somewhere, some computation is being done, and the product is being sent back here. So you shouldn't trust it, but people do. And that's the issue, right? People have become dependent on technologies, and they will, right? So really it's a case of, and that's why I got interested in this as a psychologist, how can we come up with some way that we can live in harmony with these new agents that we're creating? I mean, someone I saw on LinkedIn the other day posted this thing like, it was like directed towards teachers for some reason, like AI is coming for your job. I said, AI isn't coming for my job, it's coming for my students' job. Because if they start using AI, you've just demonstrated you no longer need that degree anymore, right? If you're scoring at the same level as an AI. But everything we've talked about here is AI has many Achilles heels. So as I was saying a moment ago, or a couple minutes ago now, we need a lot of data. I would say as an experimental psychologist, no, we need quality control in that data. A lot of these data sets, people just grab them, as I was saying before, they scrape them from the web, and they're not designed for that purpose. That's the difference between a human designer and an AI. We have an idea in mind. We have some theories we want to test out and see if it works. You can't just blindly scrape data and put it together and say, now this works, right? That's a recurrent issue you're going to see in this field, and it's going to be there for some time. But again, I'm the technology skeptic.
All right, so I have a lot to say with what Jordan said. We're kind of on like a same boat for some part and then different boat for the other argument. So first, yeah, your phone spies on you. It sells that information. Matter of fact, if you have an Android phone, you can toggle what's called a disable your sensor option. So it actually disable your camera, it'll disable your microphone, your speaker, your cellular connectivity. It pretty much disables it to the point where it's just a normal phone for calling and texting purposes. I don't turn that on because I don't mind it selling my data. I know my data is all over the internet, so I've given up at this point. What was the other thing we were talking about?
I said a lot of things, man. What are you?
Oh, yes. So
technological
students,
dependency
yeah.
was a big theme, yeah.
Yeah, so dependency on technology has always been a thing. Even when I was a student, I remember in middle school, everybody was using Wolfram Alpha to do their math problems. And even before that, I think it was like MATLAB. Before that, it was some sort of, I forget, but like throughout the ages, students will find their way. If there's a will, there's a way. And students are willing to spend that extra time to find some way to make their lives easier. You can't change that. Now, the presence of the internet, and then Google, and then Wikipedia, right? And now there's ChatGPT and all the large language models. Essentially the same thing. It's a pool of knowledge. It's a readily accessible pool of knowledge, right? You have to train the students to vet their sources. For example, you do research, you pull from other academically reviewed papers. For the students, it's the same thing. You have to teach them how to recognize good data from bad data, correct from wrong, right? You have to teach them to be ethical, and that's what Jordan does the most. Now, as far as jobs, AI is to the point where I think we can move on to the segment where we're talking about how it applies to everybody in the room, really. So if you ever used Google, if you ever use any navigation applications like Google Maps, Waze, Apple Maps, right? If you watch any Netflix, if you watch any YouTube, right? If you have any like smart home accessories like your thermometer at home, what else that I can remember?
Purchasing stuff off Amazon.
Oh yeah, shopping, right? If you shop online, if you do Amazon. So all of those, they use AI in the background to learn more about you. And guess what? The phone that steals my data, it sells it to a data broker who then turns around and sells it to these companies. And then they use that data to create a profile on you. So for example, if we're talking about cats and dogs, believe you me, tomorrow I'll get an ad on my phone telling me to buy like a dog cage or cat food, right? Right now, it's a consumer market. So people are leveraging that data to make a profile on you so they can sell stuff to you and make money off of you. So that's why data is the new gold, right? Now, student data is different. But when we're talking about jobs and AI replacements, AI is already everywhere. You can't stop that. But you still need people to work with AI. AI is not the end-all, be-all. And a really good example of this is, for example, you take, what would be a really good AI service that you think everybody uses?
AI service that everyone uses?
Yeah.
I mean, again, how are you classifying AI though? Are we
Just
talking like any
behind the
generic?
scenes AI. Yeah, generic, everyday use AI.
People's emails would be a good
Oh,
one,
yes,
I think.
yeah. Okay, so good point there. So
Yeah.
your emails, right? It used to be Google uses a filter for that. So it'll look for specific keywords or a pattern in the email. to decide if that email is a scam or like a junk email. Now, both sides have AI on their side, so Google is now using AI to decide if that email is junk, and then the scammers are now using AI to try to fool the AI into thinking it's nothing. So you see, there's still people on both sides, right? It's a never-ending rat race. But you can see AI didn't replace the scammers. The scammers are still there, right? So.
You know,
Yeah, I got a quick question. Thanks for all the panelists. Y'all are all great. I got about 2 or 3 questions for each one of y'all. We don't have enough time, so in the moment of time, I'm going to try to keep it local. I've been to a couple different cities that have Waymo, driverless cars, integrated cities. So I'm looking at like kind of the Internet of Things, like Miami-Dade, one of the largest counties in the country, just came under contract with Samsara that just says, here's where we're getting clogs in the pipes, here's where our electricity is out, here's where roads are jammed, here's where all the things are happening in real time, and here's how we can deal with it. I know Kerrville's small. we're still kind of growing on things, but Waymo and driverless cars are coming to our backyard. So it's just starting to kick off in Austin, but it takes a little while for those things to learn. So they just rolled them out in Austin, and they're kind of clogging up streets and not knowing where to go because they're learning the routes. Whenever I was in Atlanta earlier this year, they had a lot of those cars that were going around. They weren't carrying anybody, but they're learning all the routes and learning how to integrate with people. And I mean, thousands and thousands of miles driven without any accidents is pretty incredible. And if you think about this community specifically, the lack of mobility, not only currently, but in the future, and how much that would open up so many different things for this community of people that could, like they were talking about on the radio this morning, they're looking for more people for Meals on Wheels for drivers. Well, if you had robo-drivers, well, I mean, it's less of a problem, and we get more people served. So different things like that, I'm just kind of curious of, where we're at and thinking about, allowing different kind of big city technologies, right, to take off in areas like Kerrville, because Waymo actually started in a city that was about 24,000 in Arizona, and that's where they first kicked off, I think, about like 10 years ago. And it's crazy to me that they're only in like 5 or 6 cities, but now, over the next 2 to 3 years, we should see them roll out in hundreds of cities. I'm kind of curious as to what we're thinking about that for our local area.
Yeah, so, kind of what I said earlier is we want to make sure we can crawl before we walk, and I think we're a bit away. So I've seen those cars in Austin, by the way. I got cut off by one a couple months ago. And
the learning curve
who
there.
do you get mad at, though, right? But I think we're a ways away with it. Like I mentioned, Kerrville's really in the infancy, and our focus is more on really the behind the scenes, the efficiencies in the process. I can't say we're not going to be there, but I think we're a far ways away from there, from just not only just the technology, but the infrastructure also. So I wish I could say we're going to be the next iRobot, city, but we're not close to there.
Okay. And I can tell from a healthcare perspective, Peterson has always been pretty technology forward. We invest a lot in the latest technology. We don't chase it necessarily, but it's one of the strategies I've used to attract great doctors here. A rural town in and of itself is hard to recruit physicians to. If they know they're playing with good equipment and good toys and have everything they need to provide the same level of care they provide in Austin or San Antonio, I can get a lot more people looking here because people want this quality of life of a small town, but not necessarily willing to give up some of the technology that they get in the bigger cities. So I mentioned the OrthoGrid, what's called Cat-Eye we talked about that helps the gastroenterologist. We have robots that are AI.
Delta Da Vinci?
Yeah, the latest DV5s. Most hospitals in San Antonio don't have those yet. But we try to keep focus on the right areas, that if it helps our doctors be better doctors and we know it's going to provide better, safer, quality care, we stay focused there.
You ask AI which ones to pick?
No, actually. We actually rely on doctors. Like when we were looking at the Da Vinci, there's a trendsetter with the DV5. It happens to be in San Antonio. We had him come to Kerrville, talk to our surgeons, and explain how all that works, what it does compared to their current platform that doesn't have AI. And so we try to rely on those physician experts or subject matter experts like Clinton, them look from an IT side and how to make our EMR more efficient and better. They don't necessarily need to talk to physicians about that, but anything that's patient-facing or touching, we rely on physician experts to guide where we're looking there. So that's how we're using AI currently, well, technology in general, but AI is just the latest evolution of that.
Next question I had, if anybody else has a question, please cut me off. But one of the ones I had was, they said that perhaps maybe this fall we start rolling out humanoid robots for Tesla, like the Optimus Prime. So, I mean, I've been following this in China. They have, fleets of them that are starting to roll out as well. So I'm just kind of curious as to, right now we're looking at LLMs as mass language models too, for talking, texting, interacting, and that sort of things. Would this kind of be the not the CPU, but the processing unit for these things that we may have in the near future, or more importantly, kind of where are we at with NPUs, TPUs, and neural processing units? I think it's Terra processing units, and the other one is quantum computing, and kind of how does that kind of play into where we're at? Because I know that a lot of those different things are kind of up in the air right now, and some people say that neural processors kind of hyper expand what GPUs can do, and it's like, well, GPUs can already do quite a lot. But we're also finding out that with GPUs, we can do a lot more than we thought with DeepSeek that's come out of China. So anyways, there's a lot of different balls in the air with chips, and I'm just kind of curious as to what y'all's, kind of thoughts are on it.
I think that technology is rapidly micronizing the models so that they can run independent of the massive amount of hardware that it takes to run them currently. Qualcomm puts in a ton of research in their R&D department, and they are building small frame models that are, around the 7 billion mark, but can run on chips instead of requiring graphic processors to manage that. And there's a couple of other companies that are looking to micronizing the technology to create what you're describing, which is like a basic framework for these devices or these robots or our future overlords to run on. And I don't think that they've put enough time yet to, they threw everything up on the chalkboard with these large language models. They ingested massive amounts of data, massive amounts of Reddit conversations, and everything they could find to create models that did everything. But these robots don't need that per se. They really need a very specific set of instructions, basic, interface communication, and that can be done on much smaller technology than throwing ChatGPT into one of these computers. That's not to say that they wouldn't be connected to the internet and be able to, cross-reference information and cross-reference your request or your verbiage or whatever. We're looking at trying to run things on small devices so that we have the ability to do analysis, in courtrooms on powerful laptops and be able to analyze what's being said in real time and cross-reference it in real time with what is is this accurate? Does this match the statute database that we have in our law firm? Does this match, the proper form for the objections that are being thrown around in real time? And we're seeing technology that does a lot more things in real time, but it's going to have to be much smaller, in my opinion, before we're quite there yet.
So I'm going to try to keep this as short as possible. So most of my research work in my PhD has been working on like AI and modeling and architecture design, essentially. So all these processor types and architectures that we're talking about, like GPUs, NPUs, tensor cores, RT cores, right? All of these, they have their own specific purpose. Matter of fact, the phone in your pocket, I wager is a lot more powerful, and you can actually run a lot more things on your phone than on your laptop. Believe it or not, a lot of laptops, they're not as efficient as your phone's architecture. So most phones are running on what's called ARM architecture. Some use RISC-V. Again, these are all jargon, you can ignore it, but just take it with a grain of salt. We don't need that much hardware, and there's a lot of advancements in hardware. So my degree is actually computer science, or PhD in computer science and engineering. A few of my seniors, they work on chip design. So they have, in Silicon Valley, they're based in there. And right now they're developing things that, for example, memory activation, and basically it's like a very key component of our current AI models. They're able to bake that instead of on software, they shrink that and they put it on a small little microprocessor. And it doesn't take much electricity, it doesn't take any memory, and because it's hardware, everything is as fast as electrical signals go, which is a lot faster than the software overhead that you would typically see if you were to use a traditional way of just throwing it on a full-blown operating system, and it's a lot more fast, if you will. So you can get away with a lot less in terms of hardware. Like if you take Tesla, right? Tesla's self-driving or full self-driving supervised, they have hardware 3, they have hardware 4, but there are still system on chip. And system on chip is the way that everything's going. For example, Intel, right? They used to have all these massive like CPU dies, but now they're transferring their attention to monolithic dies, and then now they're going on system on chip. So everything is on a single chip, and they're very, very powerful, and it doesn't take that much to run most of what you think is required. For example, what George was saying, for a robot, you don't need all those like loaded models to do its job. For example, in Peterson, right, you guys have those machines. They don't need a massive AI model. They need a very good model, right? They need a very precisely tuned model. They don't need a bloated one that does everything, right? Just like us humans, we learn a degree, we're very specialized in that field. We don't know everything. I don't know anything about psychology, right? I might know bits of snippets, but I gave it all back, like chemistry. I know water is H2O. I don't right? So just like humans, we're going the field where you're specializing in both the software and the hardware in a nutshell. I hope that kind of answers the question.
I have a question. Inserting myself in here, and then if anybody else has questions. What are the concerns with keeping data, with cybersecurity, with keeping, so in healthcare, how are we ensuring that there's no HIPAA violations? And I don't know if that has something to do with which models we're using and how they're trained. And
We have IT Nazis that don't let us have any fun, and he'll explain all of that.
We have weekly meetings over the security of data and the boundaries of where that data sits, how it's processed, who's processing it, and almost brainstorming daily as to how we would think that IT could be used in a negative way, how it could be getting patient data in or out in a way that we can't monitor or control. So one of the biggest things with AI right now is audit trailings. We want to make sure that we can, through policy, both departmentally as well as through control mechanisms within the technology itself, monitor and track its usage. So this is an ever evolving, as we saw AI used against AI. So it is a constant training. Everything changes within months, but we are always, you might say, tabletop gaming on ways that we can make it more difficult for people like,
So I got to tell you a story about, they send us these phishing tests all the time. And so don't click the wrong email, or Clint comes down and he has this ruler that he smacks your hand with. But they've tried all these different angles on, you have UPS package, or the CEO is looking for you and needs $5 and all these things. The one that tripped up the most people was, congratulations, you won a free Chick-fil-A sandwich.
I almost fell for that.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, it's always down to the humans, not the AI.
Yeah.
Humans are the weakest link.
How do you balance the financial cost and the human cost of AI versus what the community needs? Someone mentioned driverless vehicles. That's great. But somebody's got to pay for that driverless vehicle. And some human is put out of an opportunity to assist or to have a job. How do you balance the cost of AI versus the capability of AI?
I got a great answer.
Go ahead.
So one of the challenges specifically to Kerrville for Peterson is there are not enough people in our market to fill all the various roles we have, the technical training that comes with being a nurse or a pharmacy tech or fill in the blank. And so AI and technology helps us do more with less people than we otherwise could. And so we would not be able to offer everything we offer currently without the technology because we just don't have enough people in the community to fill the roles we need. And I know that's probably not the same example for everybody, but in that sense, it's been very helpful for us. What am I doing wrong with this?
It's not you. What is?
So, at least at this point in time, it helps us provide more and better service to this community because there's a lack of workforce.
And there's always a balance with technology. There was the question when automation came through and you had assembly lines that took away jobs, but it also created new jobs. And so there's an overarching governing decision I guess we take as a society as a whole to determine whether or not that technology will benefit the majority versus the minority. And there will be losses along the way, but unfortunately where a job is taken in one place, we hope to create a new job in another.
You know, I've had a ton of attorneys worried about the AI is going to take over the job of being an attorney in law in general. And my response to them and to the data scientists and the data analysts has been, it's not the technology that's going to take over your job, it's the person who learns the technology that's going to take over your job. These are assistant technologies at this point in time, with the exception of Waymo driving cars. I mean, okay, that's one thing where a person who drives cars is not driving that car, but he then needs to figure out how to be involved in the company Waymo and be able to help with the mapping of the streets or helping with the programming of the vehicles or changing, you know, what they're doing to evolve with the technology. And I think a lot of people are starting to realize that now. There was a lot of knee-jerk reaction as generative AI became the sensation, but it's quickly not going to be in the spotlight as other technologies are kind of rapidly coming up behind them and assisting those models and assisting those technologies. We won't get into it now, but you know, we're on to the next thing already, and a lot of people have yet to even grasp what GPT can do from them personally or, you know, from a work perspective. But we're already moving, as different industries are, on the tools that are now the next generation agents and how they superpower the models and how you can create tools with those agents and basically create a whole force of employees that could get the same stuff done very, very rapidly, which frees us up and allows us to run a real skeleton crew. We run really lean as it is, kind of by design, so it forces us to automate and innovate. And anyhow, roundabout, just a tack on there. I just wanted to dovetail onto your comment.
Just real quick, I'm a layperson, but our son is selling AI, and it's so fascinating. And I've learned a lot just from listening to him on his Zoom calls. But he's selling it to the railroads. And he said, Mom, I'm selling it like crazy because, think about it, save time, save money. And it's so true because it's so much more efficient for these freight railroad cars to come in to a terminal and have the AI all figured out way before anybody else could do it. It's saving them so much time, which means money, and to have them come in and unload and not have hours of sitting there waiting. And that's just sort of sold me, okay, I don't know much about it, but it's going to save time, save money, and people will still have jobs. And I just wanted to say I've enjoyed this very much, and you have been wonderful to explain more of the technology, which I don't know a lot about, but I think you'll agree with me. It's the future, of course, and it's good. Thank you.
Just a comment. I'm a school teacher, and I see AI in our district. Students, of course, they use this app called PhotoMath to do their homework, and I've often had to tell a student, this is great work, and I've not taught you how to do this yet, so you didn't do this work. But a great aspect is that students, everybody's issued a Chromebook. They can chat with students in another class. In my class one day, a student typed to a student in another class something about a fight. They were arguing and something about a fight. Within seconds, I had the principal and the IT guy in my classroom asking, where's the fight? So what it's capable of detecting and in the response time. And I worked for an ed tech company where they do the same thing. They're able to prevent suicides. They're able to detect kids typing in self-harm. And it's I don't know, it's out there, and it's definitely a benefit in that way. So.
Is it good? Hi. This is a question, 2 parts. The first part for every panelist, and the second part for whoever wants to take it. So, 1, what's the probability of AGI, and share your time frame? And the follow-up, sorry, Jordan. The follow-up is alignment still a meaningful framework for us to navigate that relationship should it develop?
Yeah, I'm going to pass on both of those questions.
Wait, is it I didn't hear it correctly. Is it agent or AI agents that you're asking about?
AGI.
Oh, AGI.
AGI. So yes, let's define AGI first, artificial general intelligence. So in other words, to kind of take it back a notch, a lot of what we talked about here, using size terminology, is like a use case. So we can use AI to do X, Y, and Z, but they're very specific tasks that imply some kind of expertise, which we can operationalize and then transfer to the AI. AGI, that's like you and me. The ability to kind of drop yourself into any situation and adapt and respond. Okay? So they're 2 very different things. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, for the most part, we're on pretty solid footing if we're looking at the specific use cases, or what we would instead call domain-specific knowledge. The problem is when we start asking, is there AGI right now? No, there isn't. Right? There is no artificial general intelligence. Will it be here? That's a structural question. I always draw the analogy, and thank you for asking this question, of course, because it relates to sight. You don't have a single brain, you have multiple brains in your head that have developed more or less independently to perform different tasks. Left hemisphere involved in language processing, Broca-Wernicke's area. One is involved in perception, one in production. Right hemisphere, visual spatial reasoning. If you cut the fiber tract that allows the left and right to communicate, they do no longer talk to one another. So if you ask someone a verbal question and you stop them from looking at things, they can only see what's in their right hemifield versus their left hemifield. So in fact, you've got a number of different subsystems in your head that are coordinating, and all of that is being fed upwards into what we call the prefrontal cortex. That's what you might call AGI. It's really just an empty bag of resources. It keeps all the sights, smells, sounds, abstract knowledge you've acquired, and just pools it together in this global workspace. We don't have that yet. Is it possible? Sure, but you need to do a lot of interesting engineering to get there, because AI is nothing new for psychologists. There's something called the perceptron. I don't know if anyone in the room has heard of a perceptron before. 1956, it was a physical model of a neural network, okay? Very simplistic though, not the kind of, neural architecture we're talking about now.
No, actually perceptron is the vanilla AI of today.
You can call it the vanilla AI, but back then, when there was ice cream and it was first invented, we only had vanilla, folks. Let's be clear here, right? So there's nothing wrong with vanilla. But the point, of course, is this though, right? People since that point in time were saying, and Alan Turing did this before that, saying, we're gonna get it. We're gonna get AIs that are just like humans, just to be as intelligent as we are. We're not there yet. So I'm gonna avoid the second question then in terms of predicting timelines, because we're inevitably gonna be wrong.
So I can actually answer both of those questions.
Of course. We do this all the time.
Yeah, well, we work on different fields, but so for something that you look into is research, right? Research is typically, we do a research 10 years, 20 years into the future, because that's where academia has its advantages. Otherwise, if you're competing in the now, right, what are the problems of now? You're competing against multi-billion, trillion companies, right? You're not gonna have the resources and nobody's gonna fund your research because people are already doing it. So you have to look into the future. So that's how you can tell one of the trends of where things are gonna happen. The other thing is you have to look back. What is something that we've always wanted to do, but we haven't? Nuclear fusion, not fission, fusion, right? That's clean energy. Why don't we do it? One reason, money, okay? The same thing with AGI. We can make it very simply, right? We just put all the pieces together, put it in a framework, call it a day. It's gonna do the job. Why don't we do it? What's the purpose behind it? Who are you gonna sell it to? Are you gonna make more money by doing this than you're gonna lose by keep running it, right? Right now, even the big data centers like Claude from Anthropic, like what we just saw here on the screen, or ChatGPT from OpenAI or DeepSeek, right? All of these require resources to keep running. For example, the railroading track, you said your son is selling, right? Or George, you guys are probably using this, but most companies, they piggyback off of these big companies and they use the API keys, or what we call basically individually trained models that's private to your organization. But essentially, you're making use of their resources. Completely separate AI, for example, will require somebody like me or somebody with enough experience and knowledge in the field to go in and spend all their time and effort to create a custom model from scratch. Typically, companies don't have that type of resource, so they use one of the bigger companies like OpenAI. They get an API key, they tailor it to their purpose, they call it a day. It gets their job done, it makes them profit, they don't look further. But there's a lot of issues with that. If I say and I work in the cybersecurity field along with Jordan, right? If there's a backdoor or exploit, or what we call a zero-day exploit that hasn't been patched yet, well, guess what? Not only do you get the big guys, you get all the small guys who tailor on or who piggyback off of the big guys. So we don't have the infrastructure to prevent that from happening. And when you go into AGI, right, just like a human, you have to make sure every part of it is secure. We can't even say security is a good thing right now for even our current AI models. Like, there's so many different ways that I can get ChatGPT and all these models to do what they're not supposed to do. It's very scary. Now, I'm not going to go into that because that's cybersecurity and not artificial intelligence, but let's just leave it at that.
Hold on. Back to the original question, Sahai, and I want this on the record. How much money and how much time do you need to produce an AGI? How much money, how much time, Sahai, do you need to produce an AGI?
I don't think it's easy. In fact,
No, it's not.
I think it requires more than money and time.
So first, it's a response time. So something we focus very heavily on is a real-time operating system aspect of it. You ask me a question, how long does it take for my system to respond to you? Now, for example, in self-driving, you don't want that more to be than 10 milliseconds, right? You don't want the polling to be less than 60 hertz for the most part. Now, 10 hertz, that's acceptable.
Sorry, you're going to the technical stuff.
Yeah.
How many years and how much money? Exactly. So yes, you were about to say something.
I think you were knocking on the door of cognizant awareness for the AGI, not just mimicking the response times of a human, which we're probably really close to doing that now. But having a system that is aware, we're on the track for that. But it's going to require more input in order for it to understand kind of the world around it. And we haven't given it eyes and ears and a brain and all the things together. Some people have. Like, there's a lot of people working on that now, but that needs to really ramp up before we get to that point. And it seems to be exponentially ramping up towards that. I just don't think it's a time and money problem. I think it's potentially going to be like a weird anomaly that happens where it breaks its own programming. And we have these systems now that are writing themselves. They're looking for flaws and rewriting themselves. They're looking for anomalies and writing them out and analyzing in real time billions of pieces of information across all the things it's connected to. And I feel it's going to be somewhere along the lines of that gets us closer to AGI than, Google hasn't been able to do it yet, and they got all the money, and they got all the time. And I think it's a different problem for awareness, if it happens.
What happens to intellectual property in the future then?
They don't care.
They don't. Are they just taking it? And
Yeah, like OpenAI, Claude.
Yeah, that's the problem.
So it doesn't exist.
No.
They don't want it to exist.
They say they haven't infringed on intellectual property, but who's there to like catch them? Like, how do you know?
There is a big lawsuit right now. New York Times is suing OpenAI over that issue right now.
There's several lawsuits in play, and eventually
Is that going to
precedent will be
current
set.
battle for a while? Is going to be over?
Well, I mean, you've got personal identifiable information that's out there that was just absorbed into these giant tranches of data, and people are now becoming aware, hey, well, there's governance like GDPR, which you can request all your personal information removed from these massive pieces of data. Yeah,
So you
absolutely.
might want to define what GDPR is.
It's a governance that is used that allows you to extract your personally identifiable information. So your name, your email address, your social security numbers, and it's companies are getting fined billions of dollars for not being able to adhere to requests for removing PII is what we call it, and that's going to continue. The amount of fines that have happened in the last 3 to 4 years on large companies has gone up maybe 50%. As you know, in the U.S. we've been really lax at keeping up with GDPR. In Europe they've been taking it very seriously, and now there's a lot more rulings in favor of people who are suing these companies for not getting their information pulled in a reasonable amount of time, and that's changing all the time as well. But there's a lot of governance and privacy issues that are coming.
It comes out of Europe. So general data protection regulations.
Yep.
So it is European law. It is not law in the United States. There are only a couple of states which have these kind of protections. The biggest one being, of course, California, right? So you have, again, what we've been referring to here, they say colloquially, is the right to deletion. So you should be able to contact a company and say, if you have my data, I want, A, to see if you've got it and what you have on me, and B, I want you to delete that. Yeah, so that's all those things. Every time you download an app to your phone, and there's that privacy statement that's here, there's that end user license agreement, all this, no one reads this stuff.
The thing you just hit yes, accept. It's actually saying we're selling all your information, we're taking all your information, we're listening to you.
And the other side of this, and maybe you'd be interested in this too, because I looked into some studies, but they basically say it would take you decades to read all of the contracts of the applications that you have on your phone, decades, because of their length and their complexity and what have you. So in other words, you could actually say there is no viable reason to believe that anyone has a legitimate understanding of what they're...
Use AI for that.
So then you put them in a chat.
What does this mean? Oh, don't worry, it's cool. Okay, thanks, AI. Thanks.
Hey, I want to stop us there because this has been, as you can tell, I mean, look at this. George lives here in town. How long have you guys lived here now?
5 years.
His son stayed. He's at Shriner. The little one is a robotics king, right? You guys like Kerrville, right? We got Charvy. I got something special for Charvy. Peterson Health, and then Shriner University. And I think it shows you why I love this community so much, because we can have these conversations here. We have people here who are thinking about this right now, and I'm sure, I'm looking at Judge Kelly, thinking to myself, you're going to have some fun thinking about the regulatory issues facing the county in the years to come. I see a lot of you in here who are educators and bankers, civic leaders. You're all going to be faced with these issues in, I would say, a growing sense of urgency. It'll be here before you know it. There'll be a lot of things that we're going to be dealing with here in the years to come. Now, I did have one thing, folks. Now, it's Charvy's birthday before we close.
Oh.
Happy birthday.
And I wanted to show you guys. I asked Claude to write a little birthday song for Happy birthday to Charvy Torque, the tech wizard of Kerrville Town, leading innovation with skill and with care, making IT systems all run sound. From Shriner U to City Hall, your leadership continues to shine. The Citizens Academy, the top 40 list, your achievements truly divine. On your special day, we celebrate you, the connection maker extraordinaire. 300 plus LinkedIn connections agree. Your tech expertise is beyond compare. So here's to you, your birthday today. May your servers never crash, and may all your programs run bug-free as we honor you with this birthday bash. Happy birthday, Charvy. Again, we could have gone on for a long time, but we got to get you guys out of here. It's Tuesday night. You guys got probably things to do. Again, thanks to the Walters for letting us use Pine Plow. And thank you for taking a little time out of your day. I hope that you guys all had a chance to enjoy this and take some notes with you, and we'll have this conversation again real soon. Thanks for coming tonight.